Welcome. I hope you're doing well today. This morning I was reading through Mark 10 in my morning devotions and just had some truths in that passage that really stuck out to me, and I wanted to share those with you today. In Mark 10, here's the thought that came across my mind that we're going to look at just for a moment. Convenience or commitment. In our lives, and especially this particular matter, are we going to give into and live for convenience or for commitment? In Mark 10, chapter 1, it says this. It says, Mark 10, verse 1, it says, "Getting up, he went from there to the region of Judea and beyond the Jordan. Crowds gathered around him again, and according to his custom, he once more began to teach them. Some Pharisees came up to Jesus, testing him, and they began to question him whether it is lawful for a man to divorce his wife. And he answered and said to them, 'What did Moses command you?' And they said, 'Moses permitted a man to write a certificate of divorce and sent her away.' That's all they said. But Jesus said to them, 'Because of your hardness of heart, he wrote you this commandment. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate.'" Now, what they were referring to is Deuteronomy 24:1. This is what it says. It says, "When a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes." Why? He says, "Because he has found some indecency in her. And he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out from his house." Now, this word indecency in the Hebrew, it means nakedness. It means shameful exposure. It means improper behavior. All right, so there is something lewd, something unseemly that occurs, and that's what it's referring to. Is this actually permissible, let's say, by the rabbis who are experts? Because you have the Pharisees who are experts in what God's law is, and they're experts in making up a whole lot of extra laws. So they bring this to Jesus and say, "Hey, is it okay for people to divorce?" Moses said you can write a letter of divorcement, it'll be okay. Well, he said for indecency. And we know later on Jesus says for infidelity, for adultery, that is permissible for divorce. But divorce is never God's intent or God's desire. Just because there is infidelity doesn't mean there has to be divorce. There can be forgiveness, there can be reconciliation, and there can be a strong marriage going forward. Rabbi Shammai, he says that he understood that uncleanness meant sexual immorality and said that was the only valid reason for divorce. And William Barclay, he described the teaching of Rabbi Hillel on divorce and the term uncleanness. Here's what Rabbi Hillel said. They said that it could mean if the wife spoiled a dish of food, that's uncleanness, all right? That's indecency. If she spun in the streets, if she talked to a strange man, if she spoke disrespectfully of her husband's relations in his hearing, if she was a brawling woman, that means who was defined as a woman whose voice could be heard in the next house. There's also Rabbi Akiba. He even went to the length of saying that indecency, it meant if a man found a woman who was fairer in his eyes than his wife was. So all those are okay for divorce. Guzik mentions this. He says that the terms join together and separate, they make you think of and refer to the thought of amputation. So sometimes in most extreme circumstances, amputation is the right thing to do, right? As it threatens your life. But the patient, he says, must first have a diagnosis that is worthy of such an extreme solution. So when they asked Jesus about divorce, they're just looking for him to stir everybody up. Because it seems that there were not many, probably very few biblical divorces, reasons for divorce. It was a whole lot of men, especially men, taking advantage of their stature and not wanting to deal with their wife any longer. Maybe their wife is sick. Maybe they just found somebody prettier. Their wife made them mad for some reason, so they want to divorce her. And we know in that culture especially, a single woman, a widowed woman, a woman on her own, was extremely vulnerable. It was very hard for her. These men did not care. They only thought about themselves. For them, it was more about convenience than commitment, than the commitment they had made to their wife. It seemed to be just something that they could change anytime they wanted. Those wives better please me, right? That wife better please me, or else I'll get rid of her and I'll find somebody else. And Jesus says, it's the hardness of your heart that God, through Moses, allowed for divorce. God wants the marriage to be strong. Today, there are divorces run rampant in our society, right? If you want to actually look at statistics, I have a couple of interesting statistics maybe to open up your eyes a little bit. You know what the number one, from a study by Shaw in 2019, the number one cause of divorce, all right, I'm not going to give it to you yet. What's cause number two? 59.6% said it was because of infidelity. 57.7% said it's because too much conflict and arguments. The number one reason for divorce, 75%. They cited as the reason was a lack of commitment. Again, 75% cited a lack of commitment as the reason for their divorce. Again, they're not in one or both. Just saying, I'm just going to give up. I'm going to side with convenience over commitment, over the vows that I had made for better or for worse, to stick things out. That's what I see, and especially as a man, it saddens me to say this, but men, the majority that I'm seeing, at least right now, are men who bail on their wives, who neglect them, who put them away, who may be nice guys, but men who are cowards and who are uncommitted to the vows that they had made to that woman, to that wife. You may say, well, I've got a good reason. I'm going to, let's just put hypothetical out there. If you're a man today and you say, you know what, my divorce is 100% on my wife. She did 100% wrong. I've not done anything wrong. I've been perfect. All right, let's just say that's true for the sake of argument. What does God say your role is? He says, husbands, love your wives as long as they please you. No. Husbands, love your wives as long as they submit. No. Husbands, love your wives as long as they do what you want them to do in the manner and the frequency you want them to do it in. No. What he says in Ephesians chapter 5, he says this. Husbands, love your wives. What's our example? How do I know how to love my wife? Just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's our job. If our wife doesn't please us, if our wife doesn't do anything, if we do everything, if she doesn't show us affection, our job is to love her. If she disrespects us, our job is to love her. If our wife does not submit, does not respect us, doesn't care for us, doesn't desire us, our job is to love her sacrificially, just as Christ loved the church. When Christ loved the church, that is people who are his followers, is it because they're worthy? No, absolutely not. Is it because they don't cause him problems? No. Is it because they do everything right? No. Is it because they're as committed as they should be all the time? Absolutely not. Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, even though she fails him. We fail him over and over and over again. He's our example. And men, we are built, and God can bless us and give us the power and the courage and the strength to love our wives in this manner. If you say, Lee, I can't do this, then you're right. God can through you, though. So if you're willing to allow him to, he will love you. He will give you the strength and the power to love your wife as Christ loved the church. When I look at people that are going through hard times and divorce, here's a common thread I see. I have yet to see the person who is following Christ in their life, all their heart, all their soul, all their mind, all their strength, a committed believer, I have yet to see that person be the one to divorce their spouse. Now the other spouse may be divorcing, but the person who is completely sold out for God and seeking to serve and honor Him with their lives, that person is not divorcing their spouse. That person is committed. Even though it may cost them and even though things are hard for them, they are committed to do what's right. What I have seen, though, I have seen a lot of guys who attend church, who have empty religion, who are not committed to Christ. They may occasionally or even regularly attend church services, but their lives are not committed to God. And guess what? When your life is not committed to God, why would you be committed to somebody else that doesn't give you what you want, when you want it, how you want it? That's the thing I see. So I want to encourage you, men, be a man who loves your wife in spite of what you may receive from her. Our job is to love our wives sacrificially. Wives, maybe you're on the other side of that coin. Your husband is not a good leader. He's not a spiritual man. He doesn't have spiritual strength, doesn't really care about the things of God. Maybe he neglects you. He takes you for granted. He doesn't appreciate you. He talks harshly to you. Your job, according to Ephesians 5, is wives, be subject to your own husbands as to the Lord, as submit to your husband. I've heard it explained as submitting to his mission. That's what submission is, submitting to his mission, to being that helpmeet, that encouragement, that blessing to help him in his life accomplish what he would have and what God would have him to do, as long as it doesn't violate Scripture or violate your conscience. Ladies, love your husbands where they're at, even if they don't deserve it, even if they don't love you as Christ loved the church. Your job, regardless of what they do, is to love your husbands. I'm not saying you are to be in a place of abuse. You should get away from that. But I am saying, apart from that, your job is to love your husband well. And that means to submit to him, to show him, as at the end of Ephesians 5, he says this: nevertheless, each individual among you is to love his own wife as himself, and the wife must see to it that she respects her husband. Today, maybe you're struggling. Maybe things are hard in your marriage. Maybe especially if you got kids at home, if they're young or older, you get busy with them. And we can tend to maybe put too much focus on our children and put them first in our lives when they should be third. God should be first. Our spouse should be second. And our children should be under that. If that order is messed up, our marriage will be messed up. It will not function as it should. So, husbands, wives, make sure your love is aligned properly. God first, spouse second, children third. And guess what? If you love your children in the proper order, they are going to be well taken care of. They're going to know they're loved and appreciated. If you neglect your spouse and put your children above your spouse, you are harming your children. Because the greatest thing a parent can do is love their spouse. I've yet to see a bad parent who loves their spouse. It doesn't happen. If you love your spouse well, you will be a good parent. You will love your children well and appropriately. If you put your children above your spouse, it's going to hurt your relationship with them and with your spouse. And you're not going to be fulfilled. I want to encourage you, put things in the right priority. Maybe right now you're going through divorce, you're going through separation, things are hard. I want to encourage you, pray for your spouse. Your job is to be right with God and do what is right. You need to have a clear conscience to say, God, I'm doing all that I know to do. And guess what? Things might not change. But at least you can say, I did what I'm supposed to do. I honored the Lord with my choices, my actions, my commitment. I didn't choose convenience. I want to encourage you to pray for your spouse, because maybe, guess what? God is the only one that can change their heart if that needs to change. And God can undo what is going on right now. God can bring about a miracle. So today, pray for a miracle. God tells us that we have not because we ask not. We need to ask and see what God might do. I want to encourage you today. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love him as yourself. Put him the priority. Second, love your spouse. Love them as Christ tells you to. Wives, submit to your husbands. Respect them. Be that helpmeet God has made you to be. Husbands, sacrificially give yourself to your wives. Regardless of what you get in return, your job is to sacrificially love them. Put God first, your spouse second, your children third, and you will have a happy and blessed marriage. And God will bless you in this life. And you know what? You'll be an example for others to follow. That's what God would have you to do. Be a godly example for others to follow. I want to encourage you today. I don't know who this might help. Maybe this just reinforces what you're already doing. Great. Maybe you're going through difficult times. I'm sorry. All I can tell you is I can't fix it. No one can, except for God can fix it. And you do your part so that you can have a clear conscience before God that says, God, I've done all that I can. And Lord, I'm praying. I'm praying for you to do a miracle. God can change hearts. I want to encourage you, don't be a person of empty religion. Be a person who's committed to God, not out of convenience. For us, even outside of our marriages and just our personal lives, how committed are you to God? Is your commitment to him that commitment that I'm through thick and thin, I am there. I'm going to be faithful to worship him, to obey him, to love him, to service him, to serve him. I'm going to be faithful to my God. Or are you a fake believer? Or maybe even a real believer that you operate more times than not on convenience? God, I will love you at this time, but not this time. God, as long as this is not going on, I'll be faithful. I want to encourage you. Be committed to him. Commit everything to God. It's worth it. Don't live a life out of convenience. That's pathetic. It's sad. It's weak. It takes courage to be committed to God. Because it's not easy, because we live in this flesh. It can be hard. But being committed to God is worth it. Being committed to your spouse is worth it. Being committed to your children is worth it. Living life of convenience, it's never worth it. I want to encourage you today. Be committed. Love God with all your heart, all your soul, mind, strength. Please him today.